Hi, welcome to lesson 19C, line of best fit by eye. We're going to be looking at trend lines drawn sort of by eye. We're going to be using our eye to line things up properly, using our a hand-drawn scatter plot and a ruler, and trying to get the best fit for a line that would best fit the data, which technically is going to be showing the general average or general trend of all the data points, sort of summarized down into a line. So it says that we're going to be using this line of best fit to make predictions, which is what we're going to be doing. And that's kind of why we use the line of best fit. Generally, well, a couple of things, I guess. One is to make predictions, and secondly, to get the equation of the line, which would then summarize and generalize all the data points for the relationship that we're looking at. So what we would do is, to draw a line of best fit, we would draw the scatter plot by plotting all the points. And then the line needs to balance the number of points above the line with the number of points below the line. So we want to have the same number of points above the line and below the line, and all the way along the length of the line as well. Okay, so that's very important. Just because we have, a few points like this and another few points like this, so it kind of looks to me as though this trend would be kind of going up to the right. But just because we can balance and have the points balanced above and below, if we were to draw a line, well, that didn't work out very well. If we were to draw a line like that, we can see that the points are above and below the line, and they're pretty much balanced. However, it doesn't, the points don't run along the length of the line. So in order to make a better fit, we would have to adjust the line so that the line goes through the middle of the cluster of the points the best we can. Okay, so I would say that's pretty much, it's showing the general trend of the points going up to the right, and you can pretty much see that there's the same number of points above and below the line all the way along the length of the line. So that line, the best fit, drawn by eye, would be a general reflection, a general average of the points that were plotted. Now, in order to get a better sense of the line, what we would do is we try to find a mean point. And by using a mean point, that means we would take the mean of all the x values and the mean of all the y values, and we would plot that one specific point, and it may not even be a point from like an ordered pair from all the data values. It might just be some extra point that's in amongst the cluster of points. And once we find our mean point, if we have to draw the line through that mean point, then that gives us a little bit more of a basis, a reference for where that line should be drawn. So we look at this example here. Mrs. Stacy's 10 students, they scored out of 100 for classwork and final exam. We noticed that Karen suspiciously was absent for the final exam. Well, it wasn't suspicious. She was probably sick or something. Hopefully it wasn't serious. But her classwork throughout the whole term is 80, so that kind of gives a good consistency for all her marks. But she didn't get a mark for her final exam. Okay, so we're going to have to disregard Karen's work for now, because if we don't have the 10 data points for the whole class for both the classwork and the final exam, then we may as well just ignore Karen's work for now, and then we'll kind of determine later on what her final exam mark probably would have been if she had written it, considering she got an 80% over classwork, which generally is a longer period of time than writing a final exam. So the mean classwork score, well, we're just going to add all those together, and I'm going to just do this very quickly. And so we'll, you can, well, you don't have to pause the video. I'm going to pause the video to kind of do this summation and do the division here. I know we're dividing by 9 because we've got the 9 students, and I'll come back with the sum of all the classwork for now. Okay, so when I add up all the marks for the class work for the semester minus Karen, I come up with 675. And if you've actually come up with something different, maybe I've made a mistake, I apologize. I'm pretty sure that's correct. And then we'll divide that by 9, and we get 75. Okay, so 9 students, their average classwork mark is 75. And we'll take a look at the mean score for their final exam, and that also would be out of 9. So just pause here for a second. Okay, here we've got 648. And we see that that divided by 9 gives us 72. Okay, so not bad. I mean, fairly close. So we can see a lot of these scores are fairly similar to what they have during the classwork during the semester, which would indicate that the final exam scores are fairly indicative. They're fairly close anyways, of their achievement level and their skills and their understanding of their classwork throughout the semester. Okay, so we're going to now draw the scatter plot, and I'm going to be setting up the axes, the scale on the axes. I'll plot all the points, and then I'll plot the mean point, and then we will draw the line of best fit through that mean point before we continue. Okay, so I'm just going to set up the scale here for a second. So I will pause the video briefly, and we'll come back to you in a second. Okay, so there is the scatter plot. I've plotted all the points for you. The red point in the middle is the mean point. And so now what we need to do is we need to draw a line of best fit on there and just kind of see where this line will fall. I'm not sure, maybe I'll go with green here. And it has to make sure, we have to make sure it goes through the mean point. And I also need to kind of estimate to see what the general trend of the points are going to be like. So I think it might go something like that. So we want to just make sure that the trend line goes through the mean point and is pretty much balanced. I think it's fairly close there. May not be the best approximation, but it's as close as I can get at the moment. So that's A, B, and C that we just finished here. Part D, we're going to find the equation of the regression line. And so now we can easily do this with technology. We can put in classwork as L1 on the TI-84 and final is L2. And then we can go through the regression. If we do this by hand, we need to find a couple points to find the gradient and then get the intercept. So if we do the gradient, we use y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And I see I'm going to use the mean point. Of course, that's the one point that we definitely know. And as it turns out, it actually goes through this other point here, which I think is, what's that, 88 and 85? That would be Uma's point. So we'll do the mean point, so 72 minus 85, and that's going to be over 75 minus 88. Okay, so then that gives us negative 13 over negative 13. Look at that. That's pretty incredible. And so that gives us a gradient of 1. That's pretty neat. And so then the equation is going to be ax plus c. So y equals, well, that's 1x plus c. We're going to substitute in a point, and of course, conveniently, the point we'll use is the mean point. And so put in 75 and 72 in for x and y respectively. And then 1 times 75, of course, is just 75. And then when we solve for c, we end up getting -3, which isn't really ideal. But so that would mean that after somebody getting a 0 on the classwork, they would get -3 on the final exam. So, who knows? So there's the regression line that I've come up with here. And then we want to use the equation of the regression line to estimate Karen's final score for final exam. Because remember, y is the final. And so we know that her classwork was 80. And so we substitute 80 in for x. And there was a 1 in front, that's the gradient. And so it turns out that if we're using this equation to find the score for a final exam, if the equation was done correctly, see, there's all kinds of things that are that can go wrong with this. Is there's the estimation of the points that are being plotted, the estimation of the line that's being drawn, and the points that are being used. Does the line go through the points perfectly and all that? So all this stuff, there's like 3 layers of estimation and three kind of areas that could go wrong here in terms of finding the equation of the regression line and henceforth Karen's final score. But from what I've done, she would have scored a 77 by this line of best fit. All right, so we're going to move along here, and so then the other thing that we're going to look at here is when we have a line of best fit, we want to look at if we're doing some predicting, if we're going to be predicting between the two extremes of the x values, so we can draw poles through the lowest point in the x value and the highest x point, the x value, and those form the poles. And if we do an estimation in between the two poles, that's called interpolation, and that's when we're looking at data values that are inside the main cluster of points, which would be a little bit more reliable than if we did extrapolation, which would mean we're going outside or extra beyond the highest x value, or below the lowest x value. That's also extrapolation, and we're generally assuming that the trend is going to continue in the same manner, both above and below the upper pole and lower pole, respectively. So it's less reliable if we're going to be looking at the extrapolation. Okay, so interpolation is a little bit better because it's inside with all the data points, but extrapolation isn't quite as reliable because we're assuming that the trend continues. Okay, so now if we now use the line of best fit and we're going to be estimating, we want to look at somebody who had a classwork mark of 70. We want to see what their final exam would have been like, what their final mark would have been. So if we go back here, we notice that nobody had classwork of 70. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to now draw a line, a vertical line from 70%. And I'm going to just go up from 70 up until I hit the line. And then once I hit the line, I'm now going to make a left turn and come across to see what their mark would have been. So as it turns out, it looks as though, what's that, maybe 68 or 69-ish. So I'm going to say that as an estimate, and we can only estimate with this, that would be either maybe a 68 or a 69 as a final exam score if their term work was 70. Okay, and again, it's just an estimate, so but we try our best. We're hopefully going to be in around the same ballpark. So it's approximately 68 or 69%. Now, what we want to do is we want to see, well, let's take a look at somebody who had a classwork mark of 98. And we look here, and nobody here has a class mark of 98. And actually, the highest mark here we see is Ed with 95. So if we go to 98, and here again, we're estimating. We're going to estimate, and I'll use, I don't know what, this purple here. And we're going to be estimating at about 98. So we're going to guess where 98 is. So I'm going to guess that's around here. And we hit the line, and then we come across. And so I'm going to say now that for 98, if that's accurate, that vertical score there, that's maybe about 96 percent-ish. Looks to be a little bit above 95, a little bit above half. So I'd say maybe about 96%. Now, notice, of course, also, if I can draw I'll draw in the poles, and I'll draw them in with a solid line in this case. If we draw in the poles, well, here's one pole. So the interpolation, the orange line is interpolation. And here's the other pole, here's the upper pole. And so the interpolation is between the two poles, but of course, that mark of 98 is extrapolation because it's outside the poles. So that would be less reliable than the interpolation. Okay, so I'm going to go over here and I'm going to say that that mark would be approximately 96%. And these, of course, are percents. And okay, so this is fairly confident. I'd be fairly confident in reporting this score. And this would be unreliable because this is extrapolation. Okay, so that is basically drawing lines of best fit by eye. And there's a little bit of practice for you to work on. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you in class.